I work with the Karen specifically in eastern Myanmar from Karen state. Their villages were destroyed. They were the victims of torture, of abuse, of murder, of sexual violence, of forced portering, and all of these atrocities that were perpetrated by the Myanmar government. And because of this, they were forced to flee their homes and seek safety within Thailand.
Hello everyone, my name is Gad and welcome everyone to SpearheadTalk. And we're now with our interesting guest today. So everyone, please welcome Carrie. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Carrie Perkins. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I'm also currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of California, Irvine, and I'm here at the Chulalongkorn University with Rotary Peace Center, and thank you so much for having me. So I currently live in California, in Southern California by the beach. I've moved there recently from Texas, where I lived for about 20 years, but Texas is where I began my work with refugees, and specifically refugees from Myanmar. I started my journey in that work volunteering with the International Rescue Committee as a family mentor, picking people up from the airport, taking them to their new apartments, taking them grocery shopping, and doing all of these things to get used to life in the US.
You're talking like that you work about the refugees, especially in Myanmar, right?
Yes.
Why are you interested in this topic?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking. As I mentioned, I used to live in Texas. I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth, and this was the largest area of refugee resettlement in the United States. We had approximately 30,000 refugees from Myanmar in Texas. And as I started working with refugees that came from Myanmar, I began to learn about them and their families. And I became really interested on the situation that forced them to leave their homes, to come live in refugee camps in Thailand, and to ultimately resettle to the US. So as I became interested in refugee resettlement, I began to align my career and my academic goals also towards working on the refugee issue and for working towards human rights and peace. I did my first master's degree with resettled refugees, looking at the difference in the foodscape. So what life was like in the refugee camp in Thailand, what food were people eating when they came to America, how did they deal with the new food environment, especially children within the school system. So after I did that, I went on to do my PhD, and I was interested to see where people were coming from. And so in 2015, I came to visit the camps along the Thai-Myanmar border, and I began to work inside My La, which is the largest camp in Thailand on the border. And so as I began working inside that camp and getting to know the people that lived there and were fighting for their human rights, and also thinking about if going back to Myanmar was ever possible.
How did they come to Thailand?
This history goes back decades. You can trace it all the way back to 1948 when Myanmar claimed independence from Britain. But really in earnest, the fighting began in 1984, where the majority within Myanmar, or called Burma, you might also recognize, began persecuting the ethnic minorities. And so groups such as the Karen and the Shan and the Chin and the Mon, these groups were pushed out onto the borders and then eventually pushed out of their homes by a campaign by the military to rid the country of ethnic minorities. So many of these groups, and I work with the Karen specifically in eastern Myanmar from Karen state, their villages were destroyed. They were the victims of torture, of abuse, of murder, of sexual violence, of forced portering, and all of these atrocities that were perpetrated by the Myanmar government. And because of this, they were forced to flee their homes and seek safety within Thailand. We think about these camps that were established then are still standing today, and people are still living in those camps, some of the same people that crossed that border in 1984. And many of those people were born in those refugee camps. They've never stepped foot in Myanmar. They've spent their entire lives inside a camp in Thailand, and they are not able to legally leave that camp. They're not able to legally live in Thailand, to work in Thailand. And this, I think, is one of the greatest human rights issues of our time.
Yeah, I think it is very important, especially for Thai people who needs to know what happened in their own country and their neighbor.
Yes.
Yes. So you're doing research about from camps to communities, redefining refugee rights in Thailand. Could you explain more about your research? What are you doing exactly?
Sure, absolutely. This project is very much a continuation of my doctoral research. When I did my PhD, it was a time of great optimism in Myanmar. In 2015 to about 2017, 2018, you saw Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy, come into power. We had a new democratic government in Myanmar. So there was a very big feeling of impending freedom that perhaps was coming. And everybody was very optimistic that the camps in Thailand might close and everybody can go back to Myanmar, that this situation will resolve. And during that period of time, the UNHCR had set up a program of voluntary repatriation where they said, we would like to help move you back into Myanmar and we will give you some funding, a little bit of money to do that, to set up a home, to maybe get some land so that you can farm. And at the moment, it's voluntary. We're just going to help you. You can sign up to do it. And so I began my research in that context to talk to the refugees in the camp and see, do you want to go back to Myanmar? Will you voluntarily repatriate with this help from UNHCR? And what I found from that research is most refugees said, no, I don't want to go back yet. I don't trust the government. I have been here on Thai soil for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and I want to stay in Thailand. I want to make my life in Thailand, or I want to move to a third country, the US, Australia, Canada. What are my other options? Because I don't think I will be safe in Myanmar. It's only been 3 years, 4 years of this new government. And you know what? They were right, because in 2021, we have a military coup and the fighting has increased and there's no longer a democratic government in Myanmar. The situation is worse, perhaps, than it's ever been. So this research, From Camps to Communities, is a continuation of those conversations from refugees, talking to them about what they see for their future. What do they want to do if they can leave this camp? And this project is about thinking about giving refugees in these camps work rights and legal status in Thailand. How can we move people out of these confined refugee camps into the communities that they have been in? How can we get local Thai communities to welcome refugees from Myanmar, to see the value that they can add to your society, that they can add to your economy? And how can we do that in a sustainable way that builds friendship, that increases support for human rights funding within Thailand and beyond, and also gives people their dignity back and this chance to have life in peace. So this project is perhaps threefold. In that, number one, we are gauging what the refugees want to do, if they would like to work within some of these industrial or agricultural zones on the border. Number two, it's a public support campaign within Thailand. So how can we build support among the Thai population to welcome refugees from Myanmar? So that is trying to talk to Thai people about what they think about refugees from Myanmar, to try to educate them on why they came to the country in the first place, and to build support for extending human rights. And then the third is getting a policy proposal in front of the Thai government. What's really interesting is that that third piece is that we've had a major development in Thai politics within just the last couple months that perhaps will make that a reality very soon. And this was just passed in October of 2022. It was initially put forward by the Thai government all the way back in 2016, and they just ratified what's called a protected person status within Thailand. We are still waiting for it to be published in the Royal Gazette. It is not law yet, but we have made huge strides, and the Thai government has shown a really great willingness to extend legal rights for people that are fleeing persecution and violence within the country. So we have our fingers crossed that we'll see some developments soon.
Thailand now is on the verge of getting the government from the new party, which it is yet unknown.
Yes.
They can form a government or not. But the Move Forward Party, the majority seat of the parliament right now have some new foreign policies, and it is including about the position and the stance on the Myanmar, right? And they have said that they want some more humanitarian aid or set some humanitarian corridor because Myanmar and Thailand shares a lot of borders and together, and we are intertwined in some extent. So do you think that if the new policy from the Move Forward Party has implemented, will they make any change to the refugee status?
This is an excellent question, and I can tell you I have never been more optimistic than seeing some of the things that the Move Forward Party, and Pita, I think, is the leader, has put forward in relation to refugees, migrants, and extending human rights. If Move Forward, and everybody is watching very carefully what will happen in the next coming months with the election. If Move Forward is in power, I think that this will be a new era for human rights in Thailand, specifically related to refugees and migrants. Yes.
I see. But some other people might also concern that using humanitarian approach sounds like not that much into ASEAN values, like non-intervention or the Asian values, which sometimes doesn't directly talk to each other, even in terms of member states. Because like in the nowadays, the government from the Prayut, he said that it is very complicated, and sometimes he rather use secret door policy to like secretly talk and negotiate each other. Do you think that this approach might really affect the relation between Myanmar and Thai better, or is this even worse?
It's a very difficult question that you've asked, it's a nuanced issue, right? Because what you're talking about is nationalism, and how nationalism and identity ties directly to refugee policy. And we see this in every country, and especially my own country in the US, it is incredibly prominent in our national politics of this idea of if you welcome immigrants or people into your borders to live and to work, how does this affect your culture? How does this affect your standing as a nation? And it's important for us to remember that differences make us stronger, right? Diversity is something that we can look to say, this is our strength. We are more powerful because we are more welcoming of different ideas, different cultures, different nationalities. And being welcoming to our neighbors is not only an economic advantage, but it's also a cultural advantage. Depending on what happens with the government, I think we will see whether or not this is going to be advantageous or not to refugees. But it does bring up the question also about national security and borders, which I think maybe we discussed offline a bit. Specifically, the current government often has resisted regularizing both migrants and refugees, or allowing them legal work rights, because of the perception that if you allow migrants or refugees into the country, that you are somehow weakening your border or the strength of your border. And I would really argue the opposite to that, because if you provide a legal mechanism for refugees and migrants to enter your country, if you provide a way that is accessible, essentially what you're doing is you are freeing up space for your border control to actually start monitoring more clandestine routes or people that are coming into the border that do not have good intentions. So if you provide a legal way for people to access the labor market, to reunite with family, then you really free up that space to actually secure your borders in a more coherent sort of fashion.
Do you have anything to say to the audience or the government, Thai government itself about the refugee policy or even regarding of your research? You can say whatever you want.
Sure, thank you. I mean, if I could say anything, I would say, please publish this protected person status in the Royal Gazette, as soon as possible. We would love to see a change in refugee policy in Thailand. As I mentioned, Thailand has hosted refugees for decades along your shared border, and I think that any reasonable person in Thailand knows that those people are not a threat to your national security, they're not a threat to your cultural construction, but rather they're a strength. And I do hope that these policies go forward and we see this new era of change being ushered into Thailand. And I suspect that we will. So we're quite optimistic.
Yeah, okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is such a contribution that you're doing a research in this topic and for the human rights. Yeah,
Thank
so this is all for our episode. So thank you very much and I hope to see you in the next episode. So who is the next guest? To be tuned. So bye for today. Yeah, so goodbye.